She was the
Ma'am, this isn't
one
really the kind of
who
place you can
chose the
just walk
marble.
into.
We're
8
sold our
years
other properties
before,
down
she
the
had
road.
stood in a
No, we
quarry
don't,
outside
actually.
Carrara with a contractor who did not speak her language, and she had pointed at the slab she wanted for the lobby floor, the one with the grey veins that looked like rivers seen from an airplane. She paid too much for it. She had it shipped across an ocean. She watched them lay it by hand. So, when the young man behind the front desk of the Carnelian leaned across that same marble at 11:40 at night and told her, loud enough for the bar to hear, that this was not really the kind of place a person like her could just walk into, she knew exactly what the floor under his feet had cost. He did not. That was the first thing wrong. It was a small thing. It was not the thing that would end 3 careers before sunrise. Her name was Vivian Hale. She was 44 years old. She was holding her sleeping 8-year-old daughter against her left shoulder with one arm, the way you hold a child you have carried through 2 airports and a delayed flight. And in her right hand, she had a key card she did not need, to a hotel she happened to own, in a city her grandmother had been priced out of 60 years before. She owned the marble. She owned the dark mahogany desk. She owned the contracts that decided whether the young man telling her to leave would have a job in the morning. She did not tell him that. What she did instead was the thing her mother had spent a lifetime teaching her to do. It was also the thing her mother had, on certain Sunday phone calls, begged her never to do again. She stayed quiet, and she started counting. What the young man at the desk did not know, what nobody in that warm and beautiful lobby could have known, was that the woman in the grey hoodie had been receiving reports on this exact building for 3 months. Reports that said the hotel was full. Reports that said the guests were happy. Reports that said the numbers had never, in 11 years, been better. She was looking, right now, at an empty lobby. She was looking at a man turning away a paying guest while 4 rooms worth of keys sat in the drawer behind him. She was looking at the first visible thread of something that had been quietly unraveling for 90 days, run by a man she had trusted with the most important thing she had ever built. A man who, at this exact moment, was asleep in a house 3 miles away, certain that everything was under control. This is the story of the 8 weeks that started in that lobby. It is also the story of a real woman who founded a bank in this city when banks would not let women like her through the front door, a neighborhood that a highway cut in half, a fraud that 3 different sets of falsified spreadsheets were built to hide, and one manager who was very, very good at making the right people disappear. Stay with me. Her name was Vivian Eleanor Hale, 44, founder and sole owner of Hale Hospitality Group, which on its last valuation was worth a little north of $600 million, and which had started 11 years before as one failing motor lodge off Route 1 that she bought at a foreclosure auction with money she should not have spent. She grew up in Richmond, Virginia, not the Richmond of the postcards. She grew up in the part of town her grandmother used to call the Ward Jackson Ward, the oldest neighborhood of Black Richmond, a place that had once held so many black-owned banks and theaters and insurance houses and newspapers that people up north used to call it the Harlem of the South. Her grandmother, Mabel Tasker, had taken in laundry and done alterations 2 doors down from a building where Vivian would not learn until she was grown. A woman named Maggie Lena Walker had founded a bank in 1903 and become the first black woman in America to charter one and sit as its president. Vivian did not know any of that as a child. As a child, she only knew that her grandmother's hands were always full of other people's clothes, and that the neighborhood had a hole punched through the middle of it where a highway had come in the 1950s and taken half the houses, including the one her grandmother had been born in. Her mother was Dolores Hale. Dolores was 68 now and lived 20 minutes from Vivian, in a house Vivian had bought her, a house Dolores complained was too big and cleaned top to bottom every Saturday anyway. Before she retired, Dolores had worked 22 years on the overnight housekeeping and laundry shift at a downtown hotel that no longer stood. She had pressed strangers' sheets from 11 at night to 7 in the morning. She had come home in the grey light and sat at the kitchen table in her coat for a while before she could be a mother again. Vivian had watched her do that 1,000 times. Dolores had never been bitter about it. That was the part Vivian had spent her whole life trying to understand. Her mother had come home tired in a way that went all the way to the floor of her. And somehow the thing she handed her daughter across that kitchen table was not bitterness. It was clarity. Baby, Dolores used to say, you want to know what a place is really made of? Don't go where it shines. Go stand where it keeps the people it decided don't matter. They see everything. Nobody is watching them, so they get to watch. Vivian had built an entire company on that one sentence. She had married a man named Theo at 30. Theo had been an architect. Theo had sketched the first real renovation of that failing motor lodge on a napkin at their kitchen table, and had lived to see 4 more hotels open, and had then, at 39, sat down on a Tuesday with a headache that turned out to be the kind of thing that does not give you a Wednesday. He had been gone 4 years. Their daughter had been 4 when he died and was 8 now, and she did not remember him the way Vivian wanted her to, which was its own quiet grief that Vivian carried and did not discuss. Their daughter was Nia, 8 years old, 3rd grade, serious about animals and unimpressed by adults who were not. She had her father's stubbornness and her great-grandmother's hands, long-fingered, already good at small, careful work. She traveled everywhere with a one-eared grey elephant named Peanut, who had survived the washing machine more times than Theo's wedding suit had survived the closet. Vivian did not date. She did not have the time, and she did not have the wish. She had a company, a daughter, a mother, and a grandmother's portrait on her office wall, and that, in the careful accounting she did of her own life late at night, came out even. That was the woman standing in the lobby of the Carnelian at 11:40 on a Tuesday night in March, with a sleeping child on her shoulder. She had not planned to be there. She had been in Atlanta 3 days for a conference she could have skipped, and had skipped most of. Her flight home had been delayed twice. She had landed at 11 with Nia already asleep against her, and the thought of the 40-minute drive and then carrying a sleeping child up into the house had felt, all at once, like more than she had left in her. The Carnelian was 8 minutes from the airport. It was her own flagship. There was no reason on earth not to walk in, take a room, sleep, and drive home clean in the morning. There was one more reason, and she was honest enough to admit it to herself as she pushed through the revolving door. She wanted to see it. She had not set foot in the Carnelian in 3 months. She had been opening the Savannah property and closing the Durham deal and letting Richmond run itself, because Richmond was the one she never worried about. The Carnelian was her best hotel. Its numbers led the group. Its guest scores were the highest she had. Every monthly report out of Richmond crossed her desk so clean it was almost dull. Her mother would have had something to say about a report that clean. Her mother never trusted anything that didn't have the decency to have a bad day now and then. So Vivian walked in at 11:40 in a grey hoodie and old jeans, carrying her own child and her own bag, looking like exactly the kind of guest her best hotel would never expect. That, she would think later, was the most honest market research she had done in a year. The lobby was as beautiful as she remembered. Warm light coming down across the marble she had chosen. Soft jazz from somewhere near the bar. The long mahogany desk. The towers of fresh lilies she paid a florist $1,100 a month to keep alive. The lobby was also empty. That was the first thing she noticed. And she noticed it the way she noticed everything quietly, filing it away. 11:40 on a Tuesday in March was not a busy hour, but the Carnelian had 140 rooms, and the last report had put it at 94% occupancy for the month. A hotel that full keeps some life in its lobby even late. A couple at the bar, a late check-in, someone at the desk on a phone. There was one young man at the desk, and no one else. His name tag said Tyler. He was somewhere in his late 20s, neat, careful, wearing the navy uniform she had chosen, and the brass pin she had designed. He looked up when she crossed the marble, and something moved across his face. It was not dramatic. It was not even rude exactly. It was a small adjustment, the way a face changes when the eyes have handed the brain a piece of information, and the brain has decided what to do with it. He looked at the hoodie. He looked at the sleeping child. He looked back at his screen. "Good evening," Vivian said. "I need a room for tonight. One night, 2 guests. Nothing fancy." Tyler's eyes stayed on the screen a beat longer than they needed to. Then he leaned forward, just slightly, just enough, and said it in a voice pitched so that the people who were not there could still hear it. "Ma'am, this isn't really the kind of place you can just walk into." The words landed in the space between them with a particular weight. Not shouted, not aggressive, just soft and certain, the way people say a thing when they want the shame to feel less personal than it is. The woman 2 stools down at the bar glanced over. Vivian did not look at her. She kept her eyes on Tyler. "I'm asking to rent a room," she said. "That's all." Tyler straightened up. He had the smooth recovery of someone who had said the first part before and knew the second part by heart. "I apologize, ma'am. We're fully booked tonight." Vivian let 3 seconds pass. "Fully booked," she said. "You don't have one room. I don't need a suite. A standard is fine. We just need somewhere to sleep. We're sold out, ma'am. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. There are a few other properties in the area that might be able to accommodate you." She stood at the desk and was quiet for a moment. She looked at his face, not with anger, but with the careful attention of a person making a record of what she was seeing. She had been doing exactly this, standing in lobbies, watching what happened to people who did not look important for 20 years, and she knew the shape of it the instant it appeared. She did not say anything else. She did not have to wait long. Less than 3 minutes later, the revolving door turned behind her. A couple came in. The man wore a blazer. The woman wore a coat that cost more than most people's rent. They moved the way people move when they expect a room to be available, because in their experience, rooms have always been available. Tyler's whole posture changed. His shoulders lifted. His smile arrived quick and real. "Welcome to the Carnelian," he said. "Do you have a reservation with us tonight?" They did not have a reservation. They were walk-ins, just like Vivian. In 4 minutes, Tyler confirmed a room, ran a card, and slid 2 key cards across the marble, with a warmth that spread across the whole desk. Vivian watched every second of it. She did not say a word. She did not need to. The message had been delivered without one, and both people in the transaction understood it, even if only one of them would ever admit it. Then Nia woke up. She came awake the way children do, not gradually, all at once. Her eyes opened against the warm light and took in the lobby, the marble, the empty bar, the tension she could not have named but could absolutely feel in the way her mother was standing. She lifted her head off Vivian's shoulder. Peanut, the one-eared elephant, was still crushed under her chin. "Mama," she said, in the clear, unhurried voice of a child in a quiet room. "Did we get the hotel?" Vivian tightened her arm around her. "We're working on it, baby." Nia looked at the desk. She looked at Tyler, who had a smile ready for the couple, and nothing for them. She looked at the 2 key cards going into 2 strangers' hands. Then she looked back up at her mother. "Why did that man say we couldn't come in?" she said. "But those people could." She did not say it as an accusation. She said it the way an 8-year-old says a thing that does not add up. Honest, curious, loud enough in that quiet room to carry to the bar and the elevators and the desk. Tyler's smile faltered at the edges. Vivian looked down at her daughter, and she kept her voice as calm and warm as she always did, when she wanted Nia to understand that the world's confusion was not her fault. "That's a good question," she said. "I'm going to ask it too." She turned back to the desk. "I'd like to speak to your manager, please." The manager came down in 2 minutes. His name tag said Roland. He was somewhere in his mid-40s, in a suit at midnight, the kind of man who had decided, long ago, that authority was something you maintained through appearances. He had clearly been told something before he reached the desk, because he did not arrive with an open mind. He arrived with a conclusion. "Ma'am," Roland said, coming to stand beside Tyler in a way that made the geometry of the thing plain. The 2 of them on one side of the desk, Vivian on the other, with Nia in her arms. "I understand there's been some confusion. My associate has explained that we're fully committed this evening. I'm afraid there isn't anything further I can do for you. There's no confusion, Vivian said. I watched your associate turn me away for a room and then check in a walk-in couple who had no reservation. I'd like you to explain that. Roland's expression hardened, the way a position hardens when it is challenged by someone it has already decided to dismiss. My team exercised their professional judgment, he said. I stand behind it. Your professional judgment, Vivian said. I see. For a long moment, she said nothing. She thought about her mother. 22 years of overnight shifts. The uniform worn through at the elbows. The way Dolores would come home and sit at the kitchen table in her coat, not speaking, until she could find her way back to being herself. Her mother had never been bitter about it, only tired in a particular way that Vivian had understood from the time she was small. What her mother had given her was not the bitterness. It was the clarity, and, standing here, in the lobby of her own flagship hotel, holding her sleeping daughter who was no longer sleeping, who had just asked the only question that mattered out loud in a quiet room, Vivian felt that clarity settle over her like something solid. She was not going to tell them who she was. Not yet. She needed to see where this went, not to satisfy herself, because if this was happening here, at the property that was supposed to be the standard for everything else in the group, the one with the cleanest numbers, the highest scores, the report so spotless it was almost dull, then she needed to understand the whole of it before she touched any of it. You do not pull one thread and call a sweater repaired. You find out where the unraveling starts. And there was the other thing, the thing she could already feel in the air of the room. If she said her name now, Roland would have until morning to make whatever needed to disappear. He would have lawyers by lunch. He would have a story by dinner. People who get caught in the act confess. People who get warned clean up. She was going to stay quiet and watch. So she said, instead, I'd like your full name and your exact title. For the record, Roland gave both, without warmth. Vivian wrote them down the way she wrote down everything, quietly, completely, without display. Then she stepped back from the desk, found a seat in the lobby, settled Nia against her, and waited to see what would happen next. She was not finished. She was just getting started. She did not have to wait long. Roland did not go back to wherever managers go at midnight. He stood near the desk, arms crossed, watching her the way a man watches something he has decided is a problem he has not yet solved. Every few minutes his eyes crossed the lobby to where she sat with Nia, and every time, his expression carried the same message. You are still here, and I would prefer that you were not. Vivian noticed it. She noticed him whisper something to Tyler that made the young man stand straighter. She noticed the second person at the desk, a young woman whose name tag read Destiny, staring hard at the counter in front of her, while her hands had gone completely still. She noticed the two guests at the bar had gotten quieter over the last few minutes, their eyes coming toward her without quite landing. The lobby had developed a particular kind of tension, the kind that forms when people sense something is wrong and are waiting for someone else to say it first. She had seen it before, not here, not in her building, but in enough rooms across her life to know its shape the instant it appeared. Then Roland crossed the lobby. He stopped a few steps from her and spoke low, trying to seem discreet while staying just loud enough for the people nearby to hear. Ma'am, I've given you some time, and I want to be direct with you. This is a private establishment. We've explained we can't accommodate you, and you're continuing to sit in the lobby after being told that is not something we can allow. Vivian looked up at him. I'm sitting in a chair in a hotel lobby. I'm not raising my voice. I'm not causing any disturbance. I haven't given you a single reason to ask me to leave. I'm not asking, Roland said. Something in the room shifted. A guest at the bar set down a glass. Destiny lifted her head slightly and lowered it again. A few phones had appeared. Not raised, not obvious, but there, angled toward the corner. Recording the specific picture of this moment, a black woman, in a grey hoodie, an 8-year-old girl with an elephant clutched to her chest, 2 security guards, who had appeared at the far end of the lobby, as if they had been waiting for exactly this signal, and a manager whose face said he had already decided how this ended. Vivian took her phone out of the hoodie pocket. She found the number she needed. She pressed it and put the phone to her ear. The call lasted under a minute. She said 4 sentences. She listened for 10 seconds. She hung up. Then she put the phone away, rested her hand on Nia's shoulder, and stood up. "Mama," Nia whispered, "only for her. Do we have to go?" Vivian looked down at her. "Not tonight," she said. "We're not going anywhere tonight." But she did not say her name. She let them walk her toward the door. She wanted to see the whole length of it, all the way to the sidewalk, because the walk to the door was its own piece of evidence, and she intended to remember every step. And as the guards moved in beside her, she caught 2 faces in the room that she would carry with her for a long time. One was Destiny, at the desk, looking like she wanted to say something, and had learned, somewhere, that saying it would cost more than she could pay. The other was an older woman, in a grey housekeeping uniform, standing half in the shadow of the service corridor, with a cart of folded towels, watching the whole thing with the flat, knowing stillness of a person who had seen this exact scene play out more than once, and had never once been asked what she thought. The 2 women looked at each other across the marble. Vivian, who was about to be walked out of her own hotel, and the housekeeper nobody in that lobby could see. Something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. The kind 2 people share when they have both spent time being the person a room decides does not matter. Then the guards opened the door, and the cold March air came in off the street, and Vivian Hale carried her daughter out of the building she owned. The cold hit Nia and woke her the rest of the way. "I'm tired, Mama," she said, not crying, just stating it, the way she stated most things. "Why are we outside?" "Change of plans, baby. We're going to Grandma's. It's closer." That was not true. Dolores was 20 minutes away, and the airport hotel had been 8. But Vivian was not going to drive her daughter to a second hotel tonight, and she was not going to drive her home to an empty house at midnight. And she was, underneath the calm she was keeping for Nia, too angry to be by herself. She got Nia into the back seat. She buckled the belt across her, tucked Peanut under her arm, and kissed the top of her head. And Nia was asleep again, before Vivian had walked around to the driver's door. Then Vivian sat behind the wheel in the cold and did not start the car. Her phone buzzed. It was the answer to the call she had made from the lobby chair. The call had not been for help. No cavalry had been coming. The guards had not known that, and Roland had not known that, and she had let them not know it, because she had wanted to see exactly how far this hotel would carry a woman it had decided did not belong, and the answer was all the way to the curb. The call had been to Calvin Reese. Calvin was her chief operating officer. He had been with her 9 years, since the second hotel, a big, warm, loud man who had once carried her entire accounting department on his back through a software migration that should have killed the company, and had instead, the way Calvin told it, only nearly killed Calvin. She trusted him the way you trust the people who were there before the money. From the lobby chair, she had said 4 sentences to him. "Calvin, pull me the live occupancy on the Carnelian and tonight's folios. Send it to my personal email. Don't tell Richmond, don't tell anybody, and don't ask me why yet." He had said, after a pause, "Give me 15 minutes, Viv." Then he had said, "Are you okay?" Then she had hung up, because she did not yet have an answer to that one. Now she opened the email. The Carnelian's live occupancy, as of 11:52 p.m., read in the system as 134 rooms sold out of 140. 96% sold out for all practical purposes. Exactly what Tyler had told her. Exactly what the reports had told her for 3 months. She had just walked through that lobby. She had seen the parking structure on the way in, half empty. She had stood at that desk and watched a man turn her away for a room, and then conjure one out of nothing for a couple in a good coat. A hotel at 96% on a Tuesday in March does not have a dead lobby and a half-empty garage. A hotel at 96% does not have 1 clerk and 1 supervisor and 2 guards and nothing else moving. The number was a lie. It was not a small lie or a rounding error or a busy night misremembered. It was a number that had been put into a system on purpose to say a thing that was not true, and it had been crossing her desk dressed as good news for 90 days. She scrolled to the folios. The actual paid, occupied rooms for the night came to 41. 41, not 134. And beneath the 41 paying rooms sat a second list she had not asked for, and that Calvin had pulled anyway, because Calvin was thorough. Rooms marked occupied, but billed at 0, compared 19 of them. 19 rooms given away free in a single night, each one coded with the same 3-letter tag VIP and the same approving initials, RP. Vivian sat in the cold car with her sleeping daughter in the back seat and looked at her own thumb on the screen and understood that she was not looking at a rude manager and a bad night. She was looking at the edge of something. She did not know its shape yet, but she knew the way you know weather coming, that a hotel does not invent 93 rooms of fake occupancy to flatter its owner. You invent fake occupancy to bury something. You give away 19 rooms a night to people whose names you do not want billed. There was a machine running inside her best building, and the rudeness at the desk was not the machine. The rudeness was a gear of it, turning where she could finally see it. She thought about calling Calvin back and telling him everything right then. She did not. She thought about driving back to that hotel, walking in, saying her name, and watching Roland's face come apart on the marble. She did not do that either, and not doing it was the hardest thing she had done in a long time, because her mother's voice was in the car with her, the way it had been in the lobby, the way it had been her whole life. You want to know what a place is really made of? Go stand where it keeps. The people it decided don't matter. They see everything. There was an older woman in a grey uniform who had watched the whole thing from the mouth of a service corridor and had not been asked, and would never be asked, what she had seen. There was a girl named Destiny at the desk who knew something was wrong and had learned what it cost to say so. There were 19 comped rooms a night and 93 phantom guests, and a man named Roland Pierce, who had given himself the run of her flagship for 3 months, while she opened hotels in other cities, and trusted the cleanest report she had. She was not going to learn the truth of it by walking in as the owner. The owner gets the performance. The owner has gotten nothing but the performance for 90 days. She was going to have to go back as the other thing. She was going to have to go back as the woman they had already decided did not matter, and stand exactly where her mother had stood for 22 years, and watch. She started the car. She was going to do the one thing her mother had spent her whole life begging her, every Sunday, never to do again, make herself invisible, inside a place that did not want her, and she was going to do it inside the most expensive building she had ever built. Dolores Hale opened her front door at 12:40 in the morning, in a housecoat with her hair tied and one look on her face, and the look said she had already counted the hours since her daughter's flight should have landed and arrived at a conclusion. "Bring that baby in here before she catches cold," she said, "and then you're going to tell me what's got your jaw set like your grandmother's." Vivian carried Nia to the back bedroom Dolores kept made up with the quilt Mabel had pieced, the one with the wedding ring pattern gone soft from 40 years of washing. She laid her granddaughter's namesake down. Nia had Mabel's middle name. Elnora ran through all 3 of them and tucked Peanut in beside her and stood in the doorway a second, watching her daughter breathe. Then she went back to the kitchen, where her mother had already put the kettle on. Dolores did not turn the handle inward, where a child could grab it. Dolores had never once in her life left a kettle handle where a child could grab it. Vivian watched her mother set out 2 cups and the tin of the good tea and waited, because you did not rush Dolores. You let Dolores arrive. "All right," Dolores said, sitting. "Talk," Vivian told her. The lobby, the hoodie, Tyler, the couple in the coat, Nia's question, Roland, the guards, the walk to the door, then the car, and the number that said 96, and the truth that said 41, and the 19 rooms a night given away free with the same initials on every one. Dolores listened the way she had listened to her whole life, without interrupting, hands around her cup, eyes steady, When Vivian got to the part about being walked to the door with Nia in her arms, something moved in her mother's face and was put away, the same way Vivian's own face had put things away in the lobby. They came by it honest, the both of them. When Vivian finished, Dolores was quiet a while. "You didn't tell them who you were," she said. "No, ma'am." Dolores turned her cup a quarter turn on the table. "Why not? And don't give me the company answer. Give me the real one." "Both are real," Vivian said. "If I say my name tonight, that man cleans up by morning. I lose the whole thing and keep one manager's resignation. That's the company answer. And it's true." She wrapped her hands around her cup. "The real one is, Mama, I've been getting that hotel's reports for 3 months, and every one of them was a lie, and I believed all of them. I sat in my office and read 96% and felt good about it. I want to know what's really in there, and I'm not going to find it from the top. You taught me that. You're the one who taught me that." Dolores looked at her for a long moment. "I taught you to stand where they keep the ones that don't matter, so you could see clear," she said. "I did. I'll own that." She set the cup down. "I didn't teach you to climb back down into it. There's a difference between knowing what it's like down there and putting yourself back down there on purpose, Vivian. I spent 22 years getting us up out of it. Your grandmother spent her whole life. Now you're going to walk back in there and let some man who'd put his own people out in the cold treat you like nothing, in the very building you built, so you can catch him." "Yes, ma'am. That's what I'm going to do. You know what it's going to feel like." "Yes, ma'am." "No," Dolores said, and for the first time her voice was not steady. "You don't. You've had money long enough now, baby. You forgot. It's not like remembering a cold. It's like the cold's still in you. You go back down in it. On purpose. It'll find the place it used to live." Vivian reached across the table and took her mother's hand, the hand that had pressed strangers' sheets from 11 to 7 for 22 years, the hand with the same long fingers her own daughter was growing. "Then I won't be down there long," she said, "and I won't be down there alone. There's a woman in that building, Mama, housekeeping, older than me. She watched the whole thing from the corridor, and nobody in that lobby could see her. She saw me. I saw her." Vivian's throat moved. "She's been somebody's invisible woman for I don't know how long. She's the one I'm going to find first, because she's been standing exactly where you taught me to stand, and nobody's ever once asked her what she sees." Dolores was quiet. Then she turned her daughter's hand over in her own, the way you do when you are about to say something you mean. "You find her," Dolores said. "You find her, and you treat her like she's me. You hear me? Like she's me. On the worst night of any of those 22 years, when somebody could have asked and nobody did. She squeezed once. Then you go get the man, but you bring her up out of it with you when you go. You don't catch your fish and leave the net in the water. Promise me that." "I promise." Dolores let go and picked her cup back up, and the steadiness came back into her like a tide returning. "Now drink your tea before it's cold, and sleep in the front room. And in the morning I'll have that baby fed before you're even up. And Lord, Vivian, the grey hoodie, of all the things. You went into your own hotel looking like you came to read the meter." Vivian laughed, surprising herself. The first real laugh since the lobby. "That was the point, Mama. I know it was the point. Doesn't mean it didn't work on you too." Dolores shook her head, and underneath the teasing her eyes were doing the math of what her daughter was about to walk into. "Drink your tea." Vivian drank her tea. She did not yet know that the woman in the grey uniform was named Geneva. She did not yet know that Roland Pierce had already noticed, 3 days before, that someone in the company had pulled a data file he had spent 3 months making sure no one would ever pull. And she did not know that by the time she found Geneva, Roland would already be looking for the leak and would already have decided, in the way men like Roland decide things, that whoever it was needed to be gotten rid of before they could be believed. It took Calvin 3 days to set it up, and he set it up without knowing what it was for. "You want me to put you on the overnight housekeeping roster at the Carnelian," he said on the phone, slow, the way a man repeats a sentence, hoping it will turn into a different sentence. under the name Elnora Tasker, as a seasonal temp. And you don't want Pierce told. That's right. Viv, Calvin, I have known you 9 years and I am going to ask you one time, and then I'm going to do it because you asked. Are you having some kind of crisis I need to know about? Because losing Theo, and then running this hard for 4 years, and now you want to go clean rooms at midnight under a fake name. I'm not in crisis, Calvin. I'm in a hotel that's lying to me. Put me on the roster. Tell HR it's a corporate seasonal placement, which it is, and corporate placements don't route through the property GM, which they don't, so Pierce won't see it. Give me a locker and a uniform, and a name badge that says Elnora, and nothing else. She paused. And Calvin, the clean reports out of Richmond. Stop trusting them. That's all I'll say right now. Stop trusting them. There was a long silence on the line. They're the cleanest in the group, Calvin said. And there was something in his voice she would remember later, when it mattered. Not defensiveness exactly, but the particular ease of a man who liked the manager whose reports those were, who golfed with him twice, who had brought him in. Roland Pierce turned that property around. Viv, the man's a closer. I know what the reports say. Put me on the roster. He did. So, on a Thursday night in March, Vivian Hale clocked in for the 11 to 7 overnight housekeeping shift at the Carnelian, under the name Elnora Tasker, in a grey uniform exactly like the one in the photograph of her mother that sat on her office wall, and walked into the back-of-house corridor her own architect husband had designed, and that she had not seen since the week it opened. The corridor was where the building stopped performing. The lobby had marble. The corridor had a concrete floor painted grey, and scuffed back down to concrete in a path along the middle. The lobby had lilies. The corridor had a time clock, a corkboard, a break room with a microwave and a coffee maker, and a folding table, and a smell of industrial detergent that Vivian had not smelled in 20 years and that put her, instantly and completely, back at her mother's kitchen table, watching Dolores sit in her coat. It's not like remembering a cold, her mother had said. It's like the cold's still in you. Her mother had been right within the first 10 minutes. The woman in charge of the overnight housekeeping floor was named Geneva Pruitt. She was 63 years old. She had worked at the Carnelian for 19 years, which meant she had been there 9 years before Roland Pierce, and predated 3 general managers and the entire current uniform. She was a small, square, unhurried woman, with reading glasses pushed up into grey hair, and a cardigan she wore over the uniform against the night chill that the building, in its current management, no longer kept warm enough on the service side to save money. It was reporting as something else. She looked Vivian up and down once, when Vivian came in, the way you look at any new temp taking the measure. You ever do this work? Geneva said. Not unkind. Just a foreman's question. My mother did it 22 years, Vivian said, and it came out before she had decided to say it. And it was true, and it was the truest thing she had said to anyone in days. I learned at her elbow. Geneva's eyes changed, just slightly. 22 years where? Downtown. Place that's not there anymore. The Albemarle. I knew the Albemarle, Geneva said. I knew women came up out of the Albemarle. She handed Vivian a cart. Then you don't need me to tell you how to load this. Stay off the carpet path with the wheels. It squeaks, and the guests on 4 complain. Candy's in the front pocket. If your sugar drops around 3, everybody's sugar drops around 3. We do the 4th and 5th floor turndowns, and the public restrooms and the meeting level. You take the 5s. Find me if a door won't read. That was the whole orientation. It was, Vivian thought, the most competent handoff she had received in 3 years, and it had come from a woman the building had decided did not matter, exactly as her mother had promised, 19 years ago, that it would. It took 4 nights for Geneva to start talking, and she did not start talking because Vivian asked questions. Vivian did not ask a single question. Her mother had taught her that too. You do not pull the truth out of people who have learned to hold it. You stand next to them long enough doing the same work, and the truth comes out sideways, in the breaks, over the bad coffee, because it has been waiting a long time for someone to say it to. It came out sideways. It came out the second night, when Geneva sent Vivian to do a VIP turndown on the 8th floor, and Vivian found a room that had clearly never had a guest in it, bed untouched, towels stacked square, a welcome card on the desk addressed to a name, and a folder of chocolate-covered strawberries gone slightly soft because they had been sitting since check-in for a guest who had never checked in. "That's the 4th one this week on 8, Geneva said in the break room. Not to Vivian exactly, more to the coffee. We turn them down. We fluff them up. Nobody sleeps in them. Card's always got a name on it. Mr. Pierce's VIPs. She blew on her coffee. 19 years I've been here. Used to be a VIP was a senator or a singer. And you knew because the whole house knew. Now a VIP is a room we make up pretty for nobody." Vivian kept her face on her own coffee. "That's a lot of free rooms." Geneva looked at her over the reading glasses. "You count things, don't you? I watched you count the linen cage Tuesday. Habit. My granddaughter counts things," Geneva said. "Going to be an accountant. First one in the family to finish anything past 12th grade. I got her at Reynolds, the community college, 2 more semesters. I do this, so she does that." She said it plainly. No weight on it, which was how Vivian knew it was the weight of the whole thing. "So yeah, I count too. I counted that we got cut from 6 on this floor to 3 this year, and the towels we're short, and the heat they turned down on our side. And I counted that Mr. Pierce got a new car in October, the kind you notice." She set the cup down. "I don't say it to anybody. You don't, if you want the shift. But you asked me with your eyes the first night, same as I asked you. So, there it is." Vivian Hale sat in the break room of her own hotel in a grey uniform and looked at a woman who had spent 19 years counting exactly the right things and saying them to exactly no one, and she felt something in her chest that was equal parts the cold her mother had warned her about, and a rage she was going to have to keep very, very quiet for a while longer. "Why don't you tell somebody?" she said, carefully. "Corporate, the owner, somebody." Geneva laughed. It was not a bitter laugh. It was worse than bitter. It was patient. "The owner," she said. "Baby, you know who owns this. A lady. Built the whole company. Picked this floor out herself, they say. Back in the day. Real success story." She shrugged the cardigan up. "I have worked in this building 19 years, and I have never once laid eyes on her. She came through once, years back, when the new ownership took over and pulled out the old lobby and laid this marble down. I'd already been here a good while by then. Saw her across the floor about a minute. She's been a name on a check ever since. You think a woman like that wants a phone call from the night housekeeper about strawberries?" Geneva stood, gathered her cup, rinsed it in the little sink the way you rinse a cup you will use again tomorrow. "People up top see the building. They don't see the people the building keeps down here to make it run. That's not me being sour. That's just the arrangement. I made my peace with the arrangement a long time ago. I just keep my granddaughter out of it." She put the cup in the rack. "Come on, Elnora. The meeting level's not going to wipe itself, and the sun comes up whether we're done or not." Vivian followed her out, and she did not say the thing that was sitting behind her teeth, which was, "I am the lady. I picked this floor, and I have been a name on a check, and you are right about every word of it, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you were the last person in my house who ever had to make peace with this arrangement." She did not say it, but she decided it, in the corridor, behind Geneva's cart, and she did not change her mind. What she did not know was that 2 floors up, in the manager's office, Roland Pierce was at that hour staring at an access log that showed a file pull he had not authorized, from a corporate login he did not control, of the one report he had spent 3 months, making certain no one would ever have a reason to open. Maxine Dupree did not do small talk, which was most of why Vivian had hired her. They met at 9 in the morning at a diner in Church Hill. Vivian in plain clothes and dark glasses, a woman who could have been anyone, which was the point. Maxine was already in the booth with a laptop and a coffee and a legal pad, a thin woman in her 50s, in a charcoal blazer, who had spent 15 years as a forensic accountant for the kind of firms that get called after the money is already gone. She had 3 folders fanned out, and she turned the laptop around before Vivian had finished sitting down. "You were right to not announce yourself," Maxine said. "If you'd walked in as the owner 3 days ago, here's what you'd have now." She closed an empty hand. "Nothing, because it would all be gone by now. Whoever built this is careful." She tapped the screen. "Here's what I have in 9 days, working quiet, with the folio file your COO pulled. It's not enough to convict. It's enough to scare you. I'll give you both." "Give me both," Vivian said. 1. The occupancy is fabricated. Across 90+ days, the system shows an average of 91%. The actual paid room data shows 53. The gap is filled with rooms entered as occupied and billed at 0 comps coded VIP, approved by the property GM. That's not a rounding error or a busy clerk. Somebody is manufacturing occupancy to make this property look like the best in your group. Maxine pulled a sheet. "Why would you do that?" "You'd do that if you needed nobody to look closely at this property. A flagship that's quietly failing gets audited. A flagship that's the crown jewel gets left alone and gets its manager promoted. He's been buying himself room to operate." "To operate what?" "This." Maxine slid the second folder across. "There's a vendor, Brightwater Hospitality Partners, LLC, registered in Delaware 14 months ago. The Carnelian has paid Brightwater $410,000 over the last year for guest experience consulting and property renovation advisory." She looked up. "Your housekeeper's strawberries, Miss Hale. Your phantom renovations. The experts nobody ever sees. Brightwater is a mailbox. I traced the registered agent. 2 layers down, the beneficial owner is a holding entity, and the holding entity shares a registration address with a property Roland Pierce's brother-in-law manages in Norfolk. I can't prove the dollars land in Pierce's pocket yet. I can prove your hotel is paying $500,000 a year to a company that does nothing, that he approves, that traces toward his family. Give me the source invoices and the bank side, and I can prove the rest. That takes a subpoena, which takes a filing, which takes you being ready to do this all the way." Vivian looked at the screen for a long time. $410,000 to a mailbox. Out of the hotel, her husband had drawn on a napkin. "How long?" she said. "To have it airtight. 3 weeks if I'm lucky and you give me everything." He hasn't run because he doesn't know yet that anyone's looking. The day he knows, he starts shredding, and the clock changes. Maxine closed the laptop. "So the worst thing you could do right now is anything that tells him you're looking. Don't confront him. Don't pull more files through channels he can see. Don't let anyone connected to you get in his face." She picked up her coffee. "Can you do that? Stay invisible 3 more weeks." "I'm already invisible," Vivian said. "I've been cleaning his 8th floor at midnight for a week." Maxine looked at her over the cup, and for the first and almost only time, something like approval crossed her flat face. "Then you're better at this than your COO," she said. 3 weeks. Don't blow it. The trouble was that Roland Pierce did already know someone was looking. He just didn't know who. He had seen the file pull, a corporate login, above his level, reaching into the one report he had built his whole arrangement on top of. He could not trace it past the corporate firewall, and he could not ask about it without revealing that he cared. And a man who has built what Roland had built learns to read a single raindrop as the front edge of a storm. So he did what men like Roland do when they feel the ground move. He started tightening every bolt he could reach. The one he reached first was Destiny Cole. Vivian learned about it the way she learned everything now sideways, in the break room, at 3 in the morning, when the building's 2 invisible shifts brushed against each other. Destiny worked the overnight desk. Geneva worked the overnight floor. They took their break at the same time, because the building had cut the staff so thin there was only one break to take. And Destiny, 24 years old, raising her own grandmother who had raised her, scared of the man who controlled whether she got 30 hours or 15, had started, over 4 nights, talking to the quiet new housekeeper named Elnora, the way scared people talk to someone steady, who listens and asks nothing. "He called me into the office," Destiny said. turning a cup of vending machine cocoa around in her hands and not drinking it. Pierce said he wanted to clarify the night the lady came in. The one with the little girl, with the elephant. She glanced up. You weren't on yet. There was a whole thing. He had us turn her away, and then checked in some couple, and her little girl asked why, right out loud. And it was bad. It was really bad. And I just stood there. I didn't say anything. I should have said something. What did he want to clarify? Geneva said. That nothing happened. Destiny laughed. The same patient, unbitter laugh Vivian was learning was the house sound of this corridor. He sat me down and told me, real calm, that there'd been a disruptive guest who refused to leave and had to be escorted out, and that's all that happened. And did I understand? And then he pulled up the schedule on his screen while he was saying it. Didn't even pretend he wasn't. Just had next week's hours up there, my name, and let me look at it while he asked, did I understand? She finally drank the cocoa, fast, like medicine. I've got 15 hours next week. I had 30 the week before. He didn't say a word about it. He didn't have to. Vivian sat very still. She understood, sitting there, exactly what she was being asked to watch. Roland was sealing the witnesses. Destiny had seen the lobby. Destiny might talk. So Roland had reached down and put his hand on the one thing Destiny could not afford to lose, and squeezed, and never raised his voice. And that was worse than if he had. And Vivian could stop it. Right now. She could stand up in the break room, take off the grey uniform, say her name, and Destiny's hours would be safe, and Roland would be cornered. And Maxine's voice was in her ear. The day he knows, he starts shredding. 3 weeks. $500,000 to a mailbox. 90 days of lies. 19 rooms a night, and underneath all of it, somewhere, the real money she could not see yet. The bank side. The proof that would put this man somewhere. He could not hurt anyone again, instead of just somewhere else. If she revealed now, she saved Destiny's 15 hours, and lost the whole machine. Roland would resign, walk, surface in 18 months, running someone else's flagship the same way. The arrangement would survive him. It always survived the one man. You don't catch your fish and leave the net in the water, her mother had said. But her mother had also said, you find that woman and you treat her like she's me. There were 2 women in front of her, both being made to pay for what Vivian was doing in the dark, and the thing she had to decide, in the break room of her own hotel at 3 in the morning, was whether she could keep being invisible long enough to do this right, while the people she had come to protect took the blows that her investigation was sending their way. She made a small choice that night. She did not reveal herself, but she did one thing. Destiny, she said, don't quit, whatever happens with the hours. Don't quit, and don't sign anything, and don't agree to any more clarifications in writing. Can you do that for me? Just hold. Destiny looked at her, this strange, steady temp, who cleaned the 8th floor and asked nothing, and somehow sounded, for a second, like someone who could promise her something. Why? Destiny said. Because the hours are coming back, Vivian said. Sooner than you think. I can't tell you how I know. Just hold. It was the second time she had said something like that to a young person in a hard spot in 2 weeks. She seemed to be making promises lately she had no standing, in her grey uniform, to make, except she had all the standing in the world, and that was the whole unbearable joke of it. Then Geneva said the thing that turned the night cold. He's not done with the desk, Geneva said, almost idly, gathering the cups. He's down in the storeroom now, 3 nights this week, counting. She said the word the way she had said it about herself. The same word, and it landed like a stone going into a well, pulling the supply logs. The linen counts, the minibar, the cleaning inventory, going back months. She rinsed a cup. Now why, she said, to the little sink, would a man who's been giving away 19 rooms a night and paying a mailbox $500,000 suddenly care so much about whether the towel count adds up on the housekeeping floor? Vivian's blood went to ice, because she already knew the answer, and the answer was standing at the sink rinsing a cup she would use again tomorrow. Preveva, Preveya, Bina, Veve, Reveya, Vey, Reveya. Reveidon Reveya has discrepancies, money that doesn't reconcile, inventory that walks. He had always been able to bury it under the fake occupancy and the phantom vendor. But now someone was looking, and a careful man who feels the storm coming does not just hide his own tracks. He finds someone else to leave them on. And the person whose initials were on every supply log on the overnight floor, the person who had been counting the right things and saying them to no one for 19 years, the person Vivian had promised her mother she would bring up out of the cold and not leave in the net, was about to become the most convenient explanation Roland Pierce had ever found for where the money went. Vivian looked at Geneva, rinsing her cup, and understood that the investigation she was running to save this woman was the very thing that was about to put her in the worst danger of her 19 years. And she had 2 weeks, maybe less, to decide what mattered more. Maxine got close over the next 10 days. Closer than close. The subpoena for the Brightwater Bank records came back faster than she had promised, because a Delaware shell with 1 signatory and no employees does not have a legal department to slow things down. The records showed what Maxine had said they would show. The $410,000 the Carnelian had paid Brightwater for consulting that never happened had not stayed in Brightwater. It had moved, in chunks under $10,000 to stay quiet, into 2 accounts. One belonged to Roland Pierce's brother-in-law in Norfolk. One belonged, through a girlfriend's name that took Maxine 4 days to peel, to Roland Pierce. That's the spine of it, Maxine told her on the phone, in the flat voice that Vivian had come to find more reassuring than warmth. Shell, invoices, transfers, the money landing on him, with the fabricated occupancy as the cover story for why nobody was supposed to look. I'd want another week to nail the comped rooms to specific favors and finish the trace on the renovation invoices. But if I had to walk into a room tomorrow, I could end him tomorrow. You tell me when. This is your call, and your family, and your name on the building. I just count. A week, maybe less. Vivian could see the end of it now. The actual end, the room where it finished. She did not get the week. Roland moved first, and he moved on Geneva, and he did it on a Tuesday night, which Vivian would think about for a long time afterward, that it had started on a Tuesday, and it tried to finish on a Tuesday, as if the worst things in her life had decided to keep to a schedule. Vivian was on the 5th floor with her cart when the radio on her hip crackled, and a voice told all overnight housekeeping to report to the back office. She knew before she got there. She knew the way you know a thing in your body before your mind agrees to it, the way she had known about Theo's headache before the doctor said the word. She left the cart in the hall and walked to the back office, and the cold her mother had warned her about was all the way through her now, in her hands, in her teeth. Roland was there. So was a man in a sport coat Vivian had never seen, with a laptop and a lanyard that said Regional Loss Prevention, who had clearly been brought in from outside and briefed on a version of events. So was Geneva, sitting in a chair in front of the desk with her cardigan pulled around her and her reading glasses pushed up into her grey hair and her hands folded in her lap, sitting up straight, the way you sit when you have decided not to give a room the satisfaction of seeing you fold. Miss Pruitt, Roland was saying, in the gentle, professionally devastated voice Vivian was hearing for the first time, and would hear again. I want you to understand this gives me no pleasure. He turned the laptop toward her. Over the past several months, our inventory reconciliation has identified significant losses on the overnight housekeeping floor. Linens, minibar stock, cleaning supplies, and cash shortages from the housekeeping float. He clicked. The losses total just over $31,000. Every supply log on this floor for that period carries your initials, Miss Pruitt. You hold the master key to the storeroom and the float. You are the only constant across the entire window. He folded his hands. I have to tell you that we found 2 cases of unopened minibar liquor and a quantity of linens in the trunk of your vehicle in the staff lot this evening during a routine loss prevention check. Geneva did not say anything for a moment. "I don't drink," she said finally. 19 years. Anybody on this floor can tell you. I have never once put anything in that trunk but my own self at 7 in the morning. The items were photographed in place, the loss prevention man said, not unkindly, reading from a screen he believed. "Miss Pruitt, I understand. This is difficult." And Vivian, standing in the doorway in her grey uniform with the other overnight staff, watched the whole machine run and understood it completely, the way Maxine had taught her to understand it. Roland had been skimming for a year. He had real discrepancies, money and inventory, that did not reconcile because he had taken them. He had buried them under the fake occupancy for months. But now, someone was looking, and a man who feels the storm does not just hide his own tracks. He needs the discrepancies to belong to someone. He needs a name, and the name that costs him nothing, the name that no one upstairs will question, the name the whole arrangement is built to believe is the name of the woman. The building decided 19 years ago did not matter. The one with her initials on everything, the one with the key, the one nobody has ever asked what she sees. He had put the liquor in her trunk himself, or had it done. Vivian had no doubt of it. He had reached down and put his hand on the one woman in the building who had spent 19 years keeping her granddaughter out of all this. And he had taken the granddaughter's 2 remaining semesters and the 19 clean years and the dignity, and he had done it in a gentle voice. And he believed he could, because in his experience you always could. "Miss Pruitt," Roland said. And here came the part Vivian had been waiting for, the hinge of every arrangement like this. "I'm not without compassion. The company would be within its rights to involve the police tonight. $31,000 is a felony, but you've given this property 19 years, and I'd like to extend you a courtesy." He slid a single page across the desk. "If you sign a voluntary resignation acknowledging the losses and agree to a repayment arrangement, we'll consider the matter internally resolved. No charges, no police. You walk out tonight, and this stays between us. If you don't sign," he opened his hands, "then I'm afraid my hands are tied, and this becomes a criminal matter. And at your age, with a granddaughter depending on you, I'd hate to see where that goes." It was masterful. Vivian could see exactly how masterful it was. The signed confession made the discrepancies Geneva's forever, which made them not Roland's, which sealed the books against the storm. The threat of prosecution kept Geneva silent and grateful for the mercy of merely being destroyed quietly, and the whole thing dressed up as compassion, so that if anyone ever asked, Roland had been kind. Geneva looked at the page on the desk for a long moment. Then she looked up, and she did not look at Roland. She looked across the room, through the doorway, at the quiet new temp named Elnora, who cleaned the 8th floor and counted the linen cage, and had a mother who came up out of the Albemarle. She looked right at her, and there was no accusation in it, and no plea. There was just one tired, knowing, unsurprised woman looking at another. The same look they had traded across the marble 2.5 weeks before in a different lobby on the worst night of Vivian's life. The look that said, "There it is. There's the arrangement. You see it now too." And Vivian Hale stood in the doorway of the back office of her own hotel and felt the entire weight of the next 30 seconds settle onto her, because she had a choice, and there was no version of it that did not cost something she could not afford to lose. She could step forward right now. She could say her name. Elnora Tasker could become Vivian Hale in front of Roland, and the loss prevention man, and the overnight staff, and the page on the desk would become wastepaper, and Geneva would not sign anything, and the 19 years would be safe. She could end this woman's worst night in one sentence, and the second Roland Pierce heard the name, Vivian Hale, the week Maxine needed, would evaporate. He would not finish the meeting. He would walk out, and by morning the renovation invoices she had not yet traced would be gone. The comp room records would be gone. The back channels Maxine had not yet closed would close, and the man would have lawyers and a story and just enough doubt to survive as something other than a criminal. He would lose the hotel. He might not lose his freedom, and the arrangement, the thing bigger than him, the thing that had made Geneva and Dolores and 1,000 women like them pay for other people's theft for 100 years. The arrangement would shrug and find its next manager, save the woman, and maybe lose the war that was the only thing that would ever make the woman safe. Hold the line one more week and let her sign. Vivian's mother had told her both things. You don't leave the net in the water, and you treat that woman like she's me. On the worst night of any of those 22 years, when somebody could have asked, and nobody did. Somebody could ask. Right now, Vivian could ask. And she watched Geneva's hand move toward the pen on the desk. And she opened her mouth. And what came out of her was not her name. What came out of her, in the grey uniform, in the doorway, in a voice that was steadier than she felt, and carried farther than she meant, was 4 words. Don't sign that, Geneva. The room went still. Roland turned his head toward the doorway slowly, the way a man turns toward an interruption he intends to make regret itself, and looked at the quiet temp in the grey uniform, who had just told a woman not to sign. Excuse me, he said. This is a confidential personnel matter. You're not part of it. Go back to your floor. She has the right not to sign anything tonight, Vivian said. She kept her voice level. She kept her name behind her teeth, and it was the hardest thing she had ever held. That's all I'm saying. Geneva, don't sign tonight. You don't have to sign tonight. Take that page. Take a night. Take a lawyer. Nobody can make you sign a confession at midnight with no one in the room but the people accusing you. The loss prevention man shifted, uncomfortable, because she was, on the narrow point of it, correct, and he knew it. Roland's face did something then. Not much. A flicker. He looked at the temp. Really looked. For the first time, and Vivian watched a small, cold question move behind his eyes. A woman who appeared on his roster 2 weeks ago, right around when the file got pulled, who talked, suddenly, like someone who knew what a coerced confession was. He did not know what he was looking at, but he knew, the way he knew weather, that it was the wrong kind of cloud. What's your name? He said. Elnora. Your full name. You're terminated. Effective now. For interfering in a confidential matter. I want it for the paperwork. He was already reaching for his phone, already signaling the lobby. Security will walk you out. It was the second time in 3 weeks that Roland Pierce arranged to have Vivian Hale removed from her own hotel by men in dark jackets. She thought, with a calm that surprised her, that there was almost something useful in how thoroughly he kept giving her the same gift. But Geneva had not signed. Geneva sat in the chair with the pen untouched and the page in front of her, and she looked at the temp being walked out for her sake, and she put her hands back in her lap. I'm not signing that tonight, Geneva said quietly. To Roland, to the loss prevention man, to the room. She's right. I'll take my night. And I didn't put anything in that trunk, and I think you know who did. It was not enough to save her job. Roland terminated her on the spot, which was within his power, and walked them both out, the housekeeper of 19 years and the temp of 19 days, through the service door into the cold staff lot, with the threat of charges left hanging in the air behind them like a held breath. But she had not confessed. The page was blank, and a frame with no confession on it is just a pile of someone else's planted evidence, waiting for someone to look at who is not in on the arrangement. That mattered more than Vivian could say in the parking lot, so she did not try. She got Geneva's number into her phone, and she said, "Hold on, please. Just hold on a few more days. I know that's a terrible thing to ask. I know what they took from you tonight. Please hold." And Geneva looked at her, this strange, steady temp, and said, "You keep saying that, baby. Hold on for what?" And Vivian could not answer, and Geneva went home to a granddaughter 2 semesters from being the first in the family to finish anything, to tell her something, and Vivian stood in the staff lot of her own hotel and shook, and not from the cold, although it was that too. The smear was the part that nearly broke her, and she found it 2 days later, and she found it because Destiny, who had been told to hold and had held, slipped a folder under the break room door before she left her last shift of the week. It was Roland's insurance. He had built a file, a careful, gentle, professionally devastating file, the kind a man builds when he has felt a storm coming and means to be ready to explain it away. It was titled, in the neutral language Vivian was learning to read as the surface of cruelty, Incident Report Disruptive Guest, 3/11. It was about her. It described a woman who had entered the property after hours, become verbally aggressive when informed of availability, refused multiple requests to leave, created a disturbance affecting other guests, and had to be escorted from the premises by security. It noted that the woman appeared to be in an agitated state and was accompanied by a minor child, and it noted this last detail in a way that managed, without a single accusatory word, to suggest that a woman in that state should perhaps not have had a child with her at all. And clipped to the report were stills from the lobby security camera. Vivian, in the grey hoodie, at the desk. Vivian, sitting in the lobby chair. Vivian, standing as the guards came in, and the timestamp on that frame had been changed. She could see it. The metadata did not match. Maxine would confirm it later in 9 seconds flat, but the altered stamp made it look like she had been there far longer and far later than she had. Made the refuse to leave land harder, and in 2 of the frames, small, half asleep, clutching a one-eared elephant, her face turned up toward her mother, with a question she had asked out loud in a quiet room, because she was 8 and had not yet learned to pretend not to see what she saw was near. He had taken the worst night. He had taken her daughter's honest question, and he had built them into a weapon, a preloaded story to discredit any complaint that ever surfaced, so that if the woman from that night ever came back with an accusation, Shootable could produce a file that said she was an unstable troublemaker who had frightened guests with a child in tow, and any room in America would be inclined to believe the navy suit over the grey hoodie. Vivian sat alone in the break room at 4 in the morning and looked at the photograph of her daughter's face being used to call her mother dangerous. And she did something she had not done in front of anyone since Theo died. She put her face in her hands, and then she took her hands down, because that was a thing you did alone for 1 minute, and then you got up, and she got up. She made one more attempt to do it the clean way. She called Calvin. She did not say her name was Elnora, and she did not say she had been cleaning the 8th floor. She called as the owner, as Vivian, from the car, and she told her COO of 9 years that she had reason to believe Roland Pierce was running a fraud at the Carnelian Fabricated Occupancy, a shell vendor, planted evidence, a long-serving employee railroaded to cover his own theft, and that she needed Calvin to trust her and help her quietly before the property's award gala. There was a silence on the line, and then Calvin, who had brought Roland in, who golfed with him, who had stood next to those clean reports for 3 months and felt good about them, did the thing that taught Vivian the last lesson she needed before the end. "Viv," he said, gently, and the gentleness was the worst of it. "Viv, I love you. You know I love you, and I've watched you run yourself into the ground for 4 years since Theo, and I've never said anything because you didn't want to hear it. But you're describing Roland Pierce committing federal fraud, and the man's reports are the best in the entire group, and the property's about to win Property of the Year, and you've been..." He paused. "Choosing it, you've been under a lot. I'm not saying it isn't real. I'm saying before you torch a man's career and the company's best year on a hunch, let's slow down. Let's get you some rest. Let's look at it together after the gala. Okay? Don't do anything at the gala. Promise me you won't do anything at the gala." Vivian sat in the car. Her best friend of 9 years had just told her, as kindly as anyone has ever told anyone anything, that she was a grieving, overworked woman seeing fraud where there was only her own exhaustion. And she understood, finally and all the way down, the genius of what Roland had built. He had not just faked the numbers. He had made the numbers so good that the success itself was his armor. Who would believe the owner over the crown jewel? Who would believe the grey hoodie over the navy suit, the night housekeeper over the loss prevention report, the widow with the haunted eyes over the best property of the year? The arrangement was not just in the hotel. It was in everyone. It was even in Calvin, who was good, who loved her, and who still, when she told him the truth, heard a tired woman who needed rest. "Okay, Calvin," she said. "I won't do anything at the gala." It was the first time in 9 years she had lied to him. She hung up, and she sat in the dark, and she counted what she had left. Geneva was fired, threatened, sitting at home with a confession she had refused to sign, and a granddaughter she could no longer pay for. Destiny was down to 15 hours, and shrinking. The smear was built and loaded. Calvin did not believe her. The company was about to stand up in the lobby she had built, in front of corporate and the press, and every employee in the building, and name Roland Pierce, its permanent regional director, crown the man who had given away her hotel, one phantom guest, and one planted bottle at a time. The gala was in 4 days, and Vivian Hale understood that she was going to have to walk back into the room that had thrown her out twice this time as herself, with no cover left, and no one beside her who believed her, and bet 11 years and $600 million, and a woman's freedom on a single move, knowing that if she got it wrong, Geneva went to prison, and Roland got the keys to the kingdom, and her daughter's frightened face stayed a weapon in a manager's drawer forever. She had 4 days. She picked up the phone and called the only person left who never needed to believe her, because counting was not a thing you had to believe in. "Maxine," she said, "finish it, all of it. I need everything, and I need it before Friday night. We're not waiting anymore. We're doing it in the lobby." The carnelian had never looked more like the thing Vivian had dreamed it would be, which was the cruelest part of Friday night. They had cleared the lobby and dressed it for the award. White-clothed tables on the marble she had chosen in a quarry across an ocean. The lilies doubled. A string trio where the jazz usually was. A step-and-repeat banner by the revolving door, with the Hale Hospitality logo she had designed at her own kitchen table the year Nia was born. There was a podium near the front desk, and a small brass plaque on an easel waiting to be unveiled, and on the plaque, under glass, were the words, "Property of the Year," and the words, "Richmond, the Carnelian." Every employee who could be there was there, in their best, because corporate had made it clear this was a celebration, and attendance was a privilege. The regional people had flown in, 2 reporters from the trade press had come, and 1 from the city paper, because a black woman's $600 million hospitality empire, honoring its crown jewel, was a good local story. Calvin was there in a tuxedo, beaming, working the room, a man at the best night of his company's best year. Roland Pierce was the man of the hour. He moved through the lobby in a charcoal suit, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, gracious and easy, a closer at the close. Tonight they were going to name him permanent regional director in front of the press and the staff and the owner who could not be bothered to come, and he had every reason to believe the storm he had felt 3 weeks ago had passed him by, because he had buried a housekeeper under it and built a file against a ghost, and slowed his own COO down with a few kind words about a grieving widow, and the sky, tonight, looked clear. Destiny was there, on the desk, in the navy uniform, watching the room with her hands still. Tyler was there, by the elevators, in his good suit, the young man who had said this isn't the kind of place you can just walk into, and had checked in a couple in a good coat, 4 minutes later, who did not yet know that the worst sentence of his life had been spoken by him to the owner of the building, on camera, and was sitting in a folder with his name on it. And in the back, at a table near the corridor where the building stopped performing, sat 4 people. The room did not look at twice. An older woman in a good church dress, 68, who had pressed strangers' sheets from 11 to 7 for 22 years, and had cleaned this very floor in her mind 100 times from the photograph on her daughter's office wall, and who sat now with her back straight and her eyes moving over the marble like a woman, taking inventory of a thing she had been told about, but never seen. A girl of 8, in a velvet dress she had agreed to wear only after a negotiation, holding a one-eared grey elephant in her lap, watching the string trio with the serious attention she gave to all musicians. A woman of 63, in a cardigan she had not taken off, who 2 nights before had been walked out of this building accused of a theft she did not commit, and who had been telephoned that morning by the strange, steady temp named Elnora, and asked, "Please, come tonight, bring your granddaughter, sit at this table, trust me one more time," and who had come because 19 years of the arrangement had not, in the end, killed the thing in her that could still decide to hope, and beside her, a young woman of 20, an accountant 2 semesters from being the first in her family to finish anything, who had brought a small spiral notebook out of pure habit, and did not yet know she was about to watch the most important accounting lesson of her life. None of them had been told exactly what was coming. They had been told to be there, and to trust her, and so they were there. The people, the building had been built to keep invisible, sitting in the only seats in the house from which her mother had taught her you could see everything. At 8 o'clock, the lights came up at the podium, and a regional vice president made some warm remarks, and then introduced, to genuine applause, the man whose leadership had made the Carnelian the finest property in the Hale Group. Roland Pierce stepped to the podium. He was good. Vivian, watching from the shadow of the corridor where she had asked the staff to let her stand a moment before she came in, had to grant him that he was good. He thanked the team. He thanked corporate. He let a humble little pause sit in the right place. And then he said the thing that told her she had been right to wait, right to count, right to stand where her mother stood, because it came out of him smooth and proud, and entirely unaware, in front of the press and the staff and the empty chair where the owner was supposed to be. "When I took over this property," Roland said, "I asked myself one question. Who are we for? Because a great hotel knows the answer to that. A great hotel isn't for everyone. A great hotel protects something. And we made some hard choices these last few years about what this brand stands for and who belongs inside these doors. We held a standard. We didn't apologize for it." He smiled. "And the numbers, well, you've seen the numbers. The numbers don't lie." There was applause. And into the applause, the revolving door turned, and a woman walked into the lobby of the Carnelian. She was not in a grey hoodie. She was in a dark suit that fit the way clothes fit when someone has had them made, and she walked across the marble she had chosen with the unhurried certainty of a person who has nowhere she is not allowed to be, and she was, unmistakably, recognizably, the woman that man had thrown out of this building 3 weeks before, with a sleeping child on her shoulder. Calvin saw her first. Vivian watched her oldest friend's face go from confusion to recognition to a dawning, horrified understanding, watched him glance at the podium and then back at her and begin, slowly, to do the math he had refused to do on the phone. Then Roland saw her. For half a second, no longer, his face did something. The same thing Geneva's face never did, and Vivian's face had been trained out of doing it. Came apart, just slightly, the certainty cracking, the smooth surface, showing for one instant the thing underneath. The woman from that night, the disruptive guest, the ghost he had built a file against. Here, walking toward the podium, at his coronation, in a suit that cost more than his car. Then he put it away. He was a closer. He smiled. "Can I help you?" he said into the microphone, light, controlling, a host handling an interruption. "We're in the middle of a private event. I'm sure one of our team can assist you at the desk." The room had gone quiet and curious. The reporters had turned. Destiny, at the desk, had gone very still, and her hands, for the first time in 3 weeks, were not still. They had come up to cover her mouth. Vivian reached the front of the room. She did not take the microphone from him. She stood beside the podium, on the marble, and she looked out at the staff of her own hotel. And then she looked at Roland Pierce, and she spoke in a voice that did not need the microphone, because the room had given her all of its silence. "My name is Vivian Hale," she said. "I founded this company 11 years ago, with one failing motor lodge off Route 1. I own Hale Hospitality Group. I own this hotel. I own the marble you're standing on, and the podium you're standing at, and the contract that decides whether you have a job in the morning. She let it sit. 3 weeks ago, I walked into my own lobby in a grey sweatshirt, carrying my daughter, and you had me thrown out into the street because of how I looked. 2 nights ago, you fired a woman who has given this building 19 years for a theft you committed, and you put the bottles in her car yourself. And just now, in front of the press, you told a room full of my employees that a great hotel is not for everyone. She turned to the room. He's right that the numbers don't lie, she said. He's the one who's been lying, and I'm going to show you, every one of you, exactly how tonight, here, on the floor he just told you wasn't built for people like the woman who walked in. She looked back at Roland, whose face had stopped putting things away because there was no longer anywhere to put them. And there's one more thing you should know, Roland, before we begin, she said, because you've thrown me out of this building twice now, and I want you to have the full picture. She let the corridor behind her, and the grey uniformed shifts that ran the building from inside it, hang in the air for a moment. 2 nights ago, the temp you fired, for telling Geneva not to sign your confession, the one called Elnora, that was me too. I've been cleaning your 8th floor at midnight for 3 weeks. I've been standing exactly where my mother stood for 22 years and where you decided nobody important ever stands. Her voice did not rise. It got quieter, which was worse. That's the whole problem with deciding who doesn't matter. Sometimes, the person you can't see is the one who owns the building. Vivian looked toward the back of the room. Maxine, she said, come show them. Maxine Dupree rose from a table near the door, where she had been sitting unnoticed all evening in a charcoal blazer with a laptop, looking like exactly the sort of person no one looks at, which was, Vivian had come to understand, the most powerful thing a person could look like. She walked to the front, set the laptop on the white-clothed table beside the unveiled plaque, and turned it so the room, and the regional vice president, and the reporters, and Calvin could all see. My name is Maxine Dupree, she said, in the flat voice that made everything she said sound like a thing already proven. I'm a forensic accountant. Miss Hale retained me 3 weeks ago. I'm going to walk you through what this property's manager has actually been doing while he told you the numbers don't lie. I'll go one document at a time. You don't have to take my word for any of it. The documents are the word. She went one document at a time. The occupancy, 91% reported, 53% real, 90 days of phantom guests entered to make a quietly hemorrhaging property look like the best in the group, so that no one would ever have a reason to audit it. Brightwater Hospitality Partners, a Delaware mailbox, $410,000 paid for consulting and renovations that did not exist, approved by Roland Pierce. Traced through 2 layers to 2 bank accounts, one his brother-in-law's, one, through a girlfriend's name, his own, in deposits kept just under $10,000 to stay below the line that gets noticed. The comped rooms, 19 a night, coded VIP, given to no one, the strawberries going soft in rooms that were never slept in, the giveaways and the inventory bleed that a year of skimming leaves behind, and then the part that made the room stop breathing. 2 nights ago, Maxine said, Mr. Pierce terminated a 19-year employee named Geneva Pruitt for the theft of $31,000 in inventory and cash. He produced supply logs with her initials and reported that liquor and linens were found in her vehicle. She clicked. Here is the loss prevention photograph of the bottles in the trunk. Here is the timestamp. And here is the property's own keycard access log for the staff lot's supply entrance, for the 90 minutes before that photograph was taken. She let it sit on the screen. The only keycard used to access that storeroom in that window was not Miss Pruitt's. It was the manager's master key. The discrepancies Mr. Pierce blamed on a housekeeper are the footprints of his own theft. He took the money, he left the tracks on her, and tonight he was going to be promoted for it. The regional vice president had stood up. He was looking at the screen, and then at Roland, and then at the screen, and his face had gone the color of the marble. And this, Maxine said, and her flat voice did not change, but Vivian's did. Somewhere inside, where no one could see, Is the file Mr. Pierce built to discredit Miss Hale if she ever complained? An incident report describing the owner of this company as an aggressive, agitated, unfit woman who frightened guests. With altered security stills, the metadata is here. The timestamps were changed. I can show the original capture times beside the doctored ones. She clicked one last time and put it up large and did not soften it because Vivian had told her not to. And these are the photographs he chose to attach of Miss Hale's 8-year-old daughter, asleep, holding a toy. He used a child's photograph to call her mother dangerous. There's audio on the lobby capture, too. I'll play you 4 seconds of it. It's the desk associate, that night, after Miss Hale was removed. She pressed play. And out of the laptop's small speakers, into the silent lobby, in front of the staff, and the press, and the regional vice president and Tyler himself, came Tyler's own voice, 3 weeks younger, easy and certain, saying to Roland on the night they threw a woman and her child into the cold, "You can always tell, man. Real guests don't show up at midnight carrying their own bags." The sound of it in that room was its own kind of verdict. Tyler closed his eyes. Roland Pierce was still standing at the podium. Vivian turned to him. "You can speak now," she said. "If you want to. I let you finish your speech. I'll let you finish this too." And Roland, to his credit, or his ruin, tried. He was a closer. "Miss Hale," he began, smooth even now. "I think if we step into an office, away from all this, I can walk you through the context of every one of these items, because there's context to all of it, and I don't think a celebration in front of the press is the appropriate venue to—" "There's no office, Roland," Vivian said. "There's no context. There's a storeroom you used your own key to rob and then blamed on a woman who'd given my company 19 years. There's a child's face in a folder. There's $500,000 in a mailbox." She did not raise her voice. "You're done. You're terminated. Effective now. The way you terminated Geneva. Except the police are going to be a real sentence and not a threat you dangle over someone to keep them quiet. Everything Miss Dupree just showed. This room is going to the authorities tonight. The fraud, the falsified records, the planted evidence. That last one's its own felony, by the way, and it's the one I'd worry about most if I were you, because it's the one with a name and a face attached. You came after a child to save yourself. The county's going to find that very interesting." She turned to the regional vice president, who nodded once, fast, and was already walking toward the back with his phone to his ear. Roland Pierce stood at the podium a moment longer, in front of the plaque that was supposed to be his. In the lobby he had told a room full of people was not built for everyone, and then he stepped down off the small riser and walked out through the revolving door into the cold, alone, the way he had sent 2 other people out into it, and as far as anyone in the building ever knew, he never set foot on the marble again. Within 90 days, the county had charged him with fraud and evidence tampering. Within a year, he had taken a plea rather than face the tampering count in front of a jury that would have been shown a photograph of a sleeping 8-year-old. Hale Hospitality recovered the $400,000 and then some, and the company instituted, across every property, an anonymous reporting line that routed past every general manager and went to one desk, the owner's. But that was all later, and none of it was the part that mattered most to Vivian. The part that mattered most was the woman in the cardigan at the table near the corridor. Vivian walked back through the room, past the staff who were looking at her now, the way you look at someone you watched get thrown into the street 3 weeks ago and have just learned owns the street, past Calvin, who caught her arm and said, low and wrecked, "Viv, I'm so sorry I didn't." And she said, "I know," Calvin, later, and kept walking, because there was one table she had to get to before she did anything else in the world. She stopped in front of Geneva Pruitt, and she got down, so they were eye to eye, the way you do with someone you are not going to talk down to, and she took both of Geneva's hands, in both of hers the hands that had pressed and folded and counted in this building for 19 years, the hands with the long fingers, and across the table her own daughter was watching, and beside Geneva, her granddaughter, had put down her notebook. "Geneva," Vivian said, and her voice was not steady now, and she let it not be. "I'm sorry. I knew, 2 nights ago, in that office. I knew you were innocent, and I knew who put those bottles in your car, and I had a sentence in my mouth that would have ended your worst night right there, and I held it, because I was trying to catch all of it instead of just some of it, and catching him cost you 2 of the worst nights of your life, and I made you sit in them, and I am so sorry. You held on because I asked you to, and you didn't even know for what." Geneva looked at her for a long moment, this strange, steady temp who had turned out to own the building. "You're the lady," she said. "The name on the check. I'm the lady, the one who picked this floor." Something moved at the corner of Geneva's mouth. "You really cleaned my 8th floor for 3 weeks?" "I really did. You said stay off the carpet path. The wheels squeak. The guests on 4 complain." Geneva laughed, wet and surprised. And it was not the patient, unbitter laugh of the corridor anymore. It was a real one. "My mother did this work 22 years, Vivian said, still holding her hands. "Right here, in this city, the Albemarle. She came home in the grey light and sat at the kitchen table in her coat. Nobody ever once asked her what she saw, and she saw everything, and she taught me to. You've been here 19 years, and nobody ever asked you either. So I'm asking. You're not fired. You were never fired. You're reinstated tonight, with back pay, and an apology that's going in your file in writing, and a raise that should have come 10 years ago." She paused. "And I'd like you to take a new job, if you'll have it not on the night floor, unless you want it. I want you training every housekeeping lead in this group on what this work is and who it's for, because you know things about this building that I forgot when I started reading reports instead of standing in the corridor. And your granddaughter's 2 semesters at Reynolds, those are paid, not as charity, as the company finally paying 19 years of a debt it owed you, and never put on any books. The granddaughter, the accountant, the first in her family to finish anything, put her face down on the white tablecloth and cried into it, and Geneva put a hand on the back of her head and looked at Vivian over the top of it, with eyes that had made their peace with the arrangement a long time ago and were, tonight, being asked to make peace with something else. "My grandmother took in laundry 2 doors down from where Maggie Walker ran her bank," Vivian said quietly, mostly to Geneva, a little to herself. "First black woman in this country to run one, right here in the ward, when they wouldn't let women like us through the front doors of their banks, so she built her own. I used to think that story was about the front door, the grand opening, the plaque." She glanced back at the easel, and its plaque with the wrong man's victory on it, waiting to be carried away. "It's not. It's about every woman whose hands were full of other people's clothes, 2 doors down, who that bank was actually for. That's who I built this for. I just forgot, for 3 months, to go stand where they were. I won't forget again." Then she stood, and she found Destiny, still at the desk with her hands at her mouth, and she said, "You held. I told you to hold and you held, and you slipped that folder under the door knowing what it could cost you. As of tonight, you're the overnight guest services supervisor, because I need people in this building who'll act on what they know is right, and you already proved you're one of them." And Destiny, 24, who supported the grandmother who'd raised her, made a sound that was half a laugh and half 19 days of held breath, and her hours, as a strange temp had promised her, came back, and then some. And last, Vivian turned to Tyler. He was standing by the elevators, and he had heard his own voice played into the room, the worst sentence of his life, and he was not making excuses, which was the only thing in his favor, and Vivian noted it. "I'm not going to do to you what you did to me," she said. "I could. Your voice is on that tape, and you earned every consequence that's coming. But I watched a man teach you that this is how you treat people who don't look like they belong, and you were young enough and hungry enough to learn it from him, and I'm not in the business of throwing people into the cold. That's his business. It was never going to be mine." She held his eyes. "You're not fired. You're suspended. And then you're going to do this work from the other side of it, on the overnight floor, under Geneva, for as long as it takes you to understand what it costs to be the person at midnight carrying your own bags. And then, if you've actually understood it, there's a door open here for you. The same door you tried to close on me. She let it land. I know exactly what it feels like to be on the other side of the way you talk. I was holding my daughter when I found out you do too. Go find out what that costs. Then come back and tell me you're someone else. Tyler, who had nothing left to be but honest, said, "Yes, ma'am," and could not say anything more, and that was, for now, enough. The string trio had stopped playing some time ago. Nobody had told them to start again, and in the silence of the lobby she had built, on the marble she had chosen, Vivian Hale picked up her daughter, who reached up without being asked, and stood among the people the building had been made to keep invisible, all of them in the best seats in the house. 5 months later, on a warm night in August, a woman came through the revolving door of the Carnelian at 11:15, with 2 children asleep on their feet, and a diaper bag falling off her shoulder, and a face worn down to the studs by a delayed flight and a long day and a longer year. She was in leggings and a faded t-shirt. She was carrying her own bags. She did not look like the brochure. The young woman at the overnight desk looked up, and her name tag said Destiny, and under it, in smaller letters, it said Overnight Guest Services Supervisor. "Welcome to the Carnelian," Destiny said, and came around the desk, because that was a thing they did here now. They came around the desk. "Long flight? Let me get one of those bags. We've got you. 2 rooms, or 1. You want a crib brought up for the little one?" And the tired woman's face did a thing that faces do when a person has braced all day for the world to be hard and the world, for once, has decided to be gentle instead. And she said, "1 room, please," in a voice that was trying not to come apart over a kindness, and Destiny pretended not to notice it coming apart, because she had learned, from a woman who trained the whole group now, that the kindest thing you can do for a person who is barely holding on is let them hold on with their dignity in front of you. Across the lobby, at a small table near the bar, where she liked to sit on the nights she came by, Vivian Hale watched it happen, over the top of a cup of tea. She came by more now, not to inspect, to stand in it. She had learned the difference, finally, between owning a thing and being present to it, and she came by at odd hours in plain clothes, and sat where she could see the desk and the corridor both, and she watched her own house decide, over and over, in small moments no report would ever capture, what it was made of. Her mother was with her tonight. Dolores sat across the little table with her own tea, 69 now, in no hurry, watching the young supervisor carry a stranger's bag toward the elevator, with an expression Vivian had been trying to read her whole life, and could finally read tonight, because it was not complicated after all. It was just a woman who had pressed strangers' sheets for 22 years, watching a hotel treat a tired stranger, the way no hotel had ever, in those 22 years, treated her. Dolores said, which was all she said, and it was everything. Geneva came through on her way out, in a good blazer now instead of a cardigan, because the woman who trained every housekeeping, led in 11 hotels, did not need to keep her own coat on, against a cold. The building no longer ran on its workers to save $1. She stopped at the little table. "Your 8 o'clock turn-down audit's clean on every floor," she told Vivian, mock-stern. "I checked it myself. Don't you go cleaning anybody's floor tonight in a hoodie. People talk." "I learned from the best," Vivian said. "You learned from your mother," Geneva said, and nodded at Dolores, one 22-year woman to one 19-year woman, a whole conversation in it that needed no further words, and went home to a granddaughter who had finished at Reynolds in the spring and started, that very month, as a junior accountant in the company's finance office, 2 floors above the lobby, where her grandmother had once been walked out into the cold. And Nia, who was 9 now and had come along because it was summer and bedtimes were negotiable, sat beside her mother with Peanut in her lap and watched the whole quiet machinery of it, the supervisor coming around the desk, the bag lifted, the tired woman's shoulders coming down, the crib going up, the grandmother's small Milem, the trainer in the good blazer saying good night to the room by name. She leaned against her mother. "Mama," she said, in the clear, unhurried voice of a child in a quiet room, the same voice that had asked the question that started all of it, 5 months and a lifetime ago. "Is it supposed to look like this?" Vivian set down her tea. She looked at the desk, and the corridor, and her mother, and the door her grandmother had been priced out of a whole neighborhood away and a lifetime ago, and the marble she had chosen, and the people moving across it, who would never again be invisible in any building with her name on it. "Yes, baby," she said. "It's supposed to look like this." And she put her arm around her daughter, and the two of them sat and watched a tired stranger get carried, with her dignity intact, all the way home. A few true things. Before you go, Vivian and Geneva and Roland are invented. The Carnelian is not a real hotel, but the woman 2 doors down from Vivian's grandmother is as real as the ground in Richmond. Maggie Lena Walker was born in Richmond in 1864, the daughter of a formerly enslaved woman who worked as a laundress. In 1903, in the Jackson Ward neighborhood, she founded the Street Luke Penny Savings Bank and became the first black woman in the United States to charter a bank and serve as its president at a time when banks downtown would not have let her open an account at the front desk. She built an institution that helped black families in that neighborhood buy homes and start businesses when no one else would lend to them. Jackson Ward really was so full of black-owned banks, theaters, newspapers, and insurance companies that people called it the Harlem of the South. And in the 1950s, a highway interchange really was driven straight through the heart of it, cutting the neighborhood in half and erasing blocks of homes and businesses that had taken generations to build. If any of this is new to you, the Maggie L. Walker National Historic Site in Richmond is a real place, and her home is preserved there, and it is worth your time. The thing the story does with a hoodie and a keycard is not invented either. Being followed, doubted, or turned away because of how you look in stores, in lobbies, in banks, is a real and documented experience for a great many people, and it does not get less real because the person it happens to could, in some cases, buy the building. It is not about the building. It is about who a place has quietly decided it is for. And then there are the Genevas and the Delarises. There are people right now, tonight, pressing strangers' sheets from 11 to 7, mopping the floors of buildings whose lobbies they are not really meant to be seen in, doing the work that holds up the comfort of people who will never learn their names. The first black-led labor union recognized in this country was the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, organized by men who made up the beds and shined the shoes and carried the bags on the railroads, who were called by one name George, no matter what their mothers had named them, and who organized anyway, and won, and helped build a black middle class out of work that the country had decided did not deserve to be seen. If you have ever been the invisible one in a room, you come from that line. And if you have never been the invisible one, then the next time you are in a hotel lobby late at night, the person quietly restocking the towels is the one who can see the whole place most clearly. You might say good evening. You might learn a name. I'll be honest with you about the ending, because you're owed honesty. It is tidier than life usually is. In the real version, the Roland Pierces often keep their jobs, and the Genevas are not always believed, and no one walks in at the last minute to set the record straight in front of the press. I know that. I wrote it the way I wrote it, on purpose. Not because it always happens this way, but because it should, and because sometimes the point of a story is to let you feel, for a little while, the shape of the justice that the world owes a great many people, and pays out far too rarely. Hold on to how it felt. That feeling is a compass. It points at the world we still owe each other. Thank you for spending this time here. And if you are one of the people who keeps a building running from the part of it, nobody photographs I see you. This one was for you.